Master of Engineering in Surgery and Intervention program here at Vanderbilt. For those that may not know about the program, this is a professional Master of Engineering program and is designed to provide advanced technical skills in the cutting edge areas of surgery and intervention, provide aspects of professional development and soft skills. We also have a capstone design that students work on in the course of their work. And then we have our hallmark to the degree is the amount of clinical immersion experiences. And so folks can really get a good understanding of where their technologies are deployed and how they're used. So if you're interested in that, please be sure to look up, again, Vanderbilt's Master of Engineering in Surgery and Intervention program. You can find that at http://vu.edu/ESI. So with that background, in our previous panel discussions over the last 4 that we've had now, we discussed the roles of engineering in surgery and intervention and with respect to things like open software development, robotics, careers in industry, and the entrepreneurial endeavors. So today I'm kind of excited really to talk a little bit different and take a little different topic on. We spent a lot of time, in the past research-wise on preclinical systems, things like small animals and mouse systems and things like that. But today's discoveries really are arising out of human data within the context of things like imaging, electronic health records, and medical devices being deployed in human systems. And we're seeing something really new here in the development of discovery and research. So the challenge is really how to create effective systems so we can get the information from these devices and things like that and get them to be able to kind of understand and create patient-specific approaches. So in today's panel, we're going to be talking a little about this idea of digital twins as a model of discovery, aspects of sensing devices and the new dimensions of data that they provide, and finally to look at next generational devices as well. So let me introduce our panelists for today. So first we have Elizabeth Vasconcellos, director of the segment leader in software at ClearPoint Neuro. And we will be giving us some insight kind of on next generational devices in the neuro space and kind of what's on that horizon. And then we also have here Dr. Shikha Chaganti who's a research and technology manager for Siemens Healthineers, and she'll be giving us a sense of the digital twin work and some of these added dimensions to data and whatnot. So welcome to both of you. I appreciate you taking the time out of your schedule. I know you have things to do during the day, so I appreciate you taking 30 minutes out to come shoot the breeze with us. Okay, so we'll jump right in if you don't mind. So I'll start with you, Elizabeth, and I was wondering, can you tell us a little bit about ClearPoint and about your role, kind of perhaps maybe some of the things that you're kind of not necessarily working on, but some of the things that you're looking at in this space of kind of neuro devices and whatnot, and what you're involved with?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me, by the way, on your panel, and it's really, really an honor. ClearPoint is a small medical device company that's based in Solana Beach, California. I'm remote. I live in New York City, and ClearPoint is essentially a stereotactic neuronavigation company. They specialize in precision procedures, delivering devices like DBS or laser therapy or drug delivery catheters. And the ClearPoint system, as it's known, is basically a miniaturized stereotactic platform that's made from MRI-safe materials so that you can deliver these devices in an MRI, which is sort of a novel technology. I'm relatively new to ClearPoint. Though I've worked, in a sort of partner capacity with them for many years. I am the director of and segment leader of systems and software, which is basically a marketing role that I would classify as a upstream product management type of role. And so that means that I work across the company with R&D, with clinical, sales, regulatory, and what I'm responsible for is helping to set the roadmap and strategy for our software and systems so that they can serve all of the different clinical procedures. And I think you want a little bit about like what we're doing now and what some of the innovations are. A couple of things to mention is sort of the recent move to expand the portfolio outside of the MRI and into the OR to be able to enable our procedures and expand our footprint. We've also launched a new laser therapy system which has some really interesting and unique characteristics. And there's also a big push on the software side. So building algorithms that essentially enable some of these really complex workflows. One in particular is, in the drug delivery space, if you're familiar with convection enhanced delivery of therapeutics to the brain, you understand there's a number of complicated 3D problems like, where will the drug be delivered to, and where has it delivered to already while you're in the procedure, and developing algorithms to sort of solve those unique problems is something that we're really focused on right now.
So that's another area I'll have to talk to you later about. I've been doing some modeling in that area, so that's kind of neat that you're working on those types of things. And it sounds like, from the perspective of what you're doing, there's a real blurring of lines between imaging, device, and procedure. Really kind of, it sounds like pretty dynamic, environment versus like, the very separation that we had quite a few years ago between the roles. It seems like it's a blurring of all of that. That's really interesting. That's really great stuff. Shikha, how about you and some of the work that you're doing at the Healthineers, and kind of, what's your role there as well, and some of the kind of developments that are going on and what you've been involved with? Can you speak to a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So Siemens Healthineers is a very big organization. They have multiple business divisions. So, everyone's probably familiar with the devices, the CT and MR machines. So there's the diagnostic imaging team, there's cancer care, there's advanced therapies, there's laboratory diagnostics, and so on. It's like a huge healthcare services and solutions organization. Where I work, though, is a very small group that focuses on AI and innovation. So what we do is not as much. I mean, we do work with, we have touch points with all of these divisions, but we are basically the experts in AI, and wherever there could be an AI solution in this space, we come in. We have teams that are focused on different parts of the body, different diseases, intervention versus imaging versus NLP, and so on. But we provide the AI expertise for the business. We do work on a lot of business projects, but we also focus, since we are an innovation team, we also focus on a lot of research as well. We work with medical centers, and we when I started off at Siemens Healthineers as an AI scientist, my job was like a lot like how it was in grad school, reading papers, doing research, writing grants, executing what you've done in papers and so on. And then now I've also led a few projects, and that involves talking more with key opinion leaders in the medical industry, providers, and then also talking to business leaders to see where we can make the greatest clinical impact. And that is like a role that we have to balance very well in our center. Is not only do we need to focus on cutting edge technologies and AI solutions, but also we need to be aware of where they can have the maximum clinical impact. So those are some of, it's a very wide array of problems that we solve, but that's a general overview.
So it's funny, we were talking about, we have aspects of customer discovery that you still do even now, these many years later. And you were here at Vanderbilt side, so full disclosure there, you're one of our alum, which is awesome. Mm-hmm. But it sounds like you really, when you were here, I remember when you were here, you did a lot of work on really heterogeneous data. You were looking mm-hmm. at ophthalmological, applications back then. And it sounds like you're, seeing even more, heterogeneity of data, and it's something that's, really something that, from a technology standpoint, AI standpoint, you really have to bring together to kind of create new products, which that's pretty exciting stuff in terms of what you're seeing.
Yeah.
That's excellent. So staying with you, actually, Shikha, if you don't mind, this idea, we talked a little about kind of this idea of a digital human, this kind of digital twin technology. I guess, what I'd like to get a little more broader look at it, given that you're looking in the AI world and a lot of the data world. I guess, what does that mean to you? What does the digital twin technology mean to you? And maybe why are you kind of excited about that? And maybe what its impact might be that you could see?
Yeah, sure. It's a very big topic, and I think it's also become a buzzword now. But essentially, a digital twin, and they've been in use in other industries for a very long time, is basically a digital model of a physical object, and they've been used in manufacturing and automobile industries, among other industries, for a very long time. So it's very nice to have a digital model of a physical object, so you can test on that, you can do experiments on that, simulations on that to see how it's working, and then you implement that in the real world. Of course, now the idea of digital twins in healthcare, people have, even in healthcare, they've talked about different types of digital twins, like a digital twin of a doctor, digital twin of a nurse, digital twin of like surgical devices, the digital twins of humans, and so on, right? But when you're talking about digital twins of humans, it becomes a much more complex problem, since human bodies are much more complex than a car or a part in a manufacturing plant. And also, when people are talking about digital twins of the human body, I've also seen that they're talking about a very diverse set of ideas, the most ambitious of which is having a digital version of yourself that continues to grow with you in the digital world. It keeps taking in the data, like everything that happens to you, you feed, maybe you're able to feed that to the digital model, and it grows with you. And whatever happens to you, maybe you can predict it happening in the digital model. You can try interventions on the digital model before you try it on yourself, and so on. So that is the most ambitious idea. And of course, we are, quite a few ways from that. And then people also talk in more specific settings, like let's say you want to do an intervention, give a medication or a surgical treatment. Can you try that specific, can you develop digital twins of like an organ, like a digital twin of the heart or something, so you can try an intervention on that to see how it responds. People also talk about it in wellness space, to see how to use this technology to live better, eat better, and so on. So we are talking really about like a wide array of problems here, and also leading to many challenges from sensing, because when you want to learn about the complexity of a human body, you need to collect a lot of data. And we've talked about this a little bit offline just now. Right now data is collected pretty sporadically. Like maybe you go to your physical once a year, or you just go when you have a symptom or an adverse event. So there's very sporadic data that's collected on us. Of course, now we have wearables. A lot of us are using Apple Watches and things like that. And maybe there is like more data collection, but it's still limited. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of like problems open in sensing, to sense the state of the human body more accurately, continuously, longitudinally. And then there's a lot of challenges in modeling. Like how do you absorb all of this data? Even starting with something as simple as, where do you store all this data, right? Because traditionally, we have EHR systems, we have PACS systems. We talked a little about pathology. Like a lot of hospitals still store slides in a drawer, and there's genetic data. A lot of people are doing direct-to-consumer genetic testing at home. There's wearables at home. Where does all this data merge? And where does it all connect? It's a very challenging problem. And what are the data models to absorb it? That's starting from just the absorption of the data to modeling of the data. There's just many challenges that are in the space.
That's really fascinating. I mean, it really, like, when you start to think about that more broadly as you speak, I'm kind of thinking, we think of something really simple. If I do a survey with my doctor, I'm eating too much fatty food. They tell me, I got to go on a statin or something like that. But you're really talking about almost like a living, breathing thing with respect to the data itself, and that it absorbs it,
Mhm.
potentially, or incorporates every part of our life. If it's, nowadays everything's documented to some degree, but then that's great. Where do you store it? And then also, how do you incorporate that into what kind of model? What does it look like? I mean, you have to come up with, that's really interesting. And then the idea of it being used in a predictive capacity, that's just super fascinating. I mean, it blows your mind a little bit in terms of where it could go,
Yeah.
but I don't totally can appreciate the complexity of that problem. That sounds, I can't run my little systems in the lab with small pieces a day, never mind that kind of thing. So that's really fascinating. And I think it really does require like a large scale, company like a Siemens in order to kind of go after something like that. That's huge. That's good. That's great. Going back to you, Elizabeth, I've watched your career over the years, first at Brain Lab, then BlackRock, Neurotech, and now at ClearPoint, so you really have, and you kind of alluded to it before, you've had a pretty good survey of the neurospace, device space in general, going really from, basic tumor resection all the way out to kind of, functional neurosurgery now at ClearPoint. So I guess, what are the things that you're seeing in the device development area? What are you excited about? And what do you think the impact of that is? And if you could speak to data, that'd be great too.
Yeah, and really fascinating, Shika. Like, I will say that these are problems that I've mulled over with colleagues as well, and really interesting problem to solve. I think also just another point on that before I jump into your question is just who would pay for it, and who, you were talking about where is it stored, but right, like where's the incentives on the industry side? It's definitely an interesting challenge. So, but back to your question, Mike. Yeah, my experience is really centered in neurosurgery. So I'll speak from neurosurgery. I think the last 10 years, really the focus has been on minimally invasive surgery and robotics and enabling technologies. And, I think these fields will continue to grow. But I think the focus needs to be and is on providing devices that are less expensive and more purpose-built, which means, moving away from probably larger industrial robots, leveraging new materials, manufacturing techniques. The only way to really expand the footprint and give access to more people and expand these therapies is to make them less expensive and more accessible. And so that's definitely something that I'm seeing in enabling technologies. On the therapy side in neuro, I'm seeing a lot of neuromodulation devices and startups in bioelectronic medicine. You see there just tons. And I think, this is the consequence of a lot of really great foundational research and discovery in connectomics and understanding and maybe illuminating the circuitry and the neural pathways of the body, right? Knowing where to target and what to stimulate, what to disrupt. And I think this is going to have a really, really great impact in addressing unmet needs for neurodegenerative diseases. And I think that's, something that I just am seeing more and more. And then on the software and AI side, I mean, there's just also a big, big push, AR, VR, AI, computer vision. I think that from a surgery perspective, if I'm going to limit the scope to some degree, I think there's a very near promise to deliver guidance and data to surgeons, during the procedure and this of course could help level up the novice surgeons or less specialized surgeons, again, increasing the access outside of some of these, premier centers and being able to, get these procedures to other people who don't have access currently.
Yeah, I mean, the neuro space is a great space to watch in general for a lot of these things, only because, a lot of the guidance stuff really started first there to some degree. Minimally invasive, you could argue, started in the abdomen with some laparoscopic stuff a little earlier. But when it comes to, really trying to push the edge, really kind of do novel and new therapies, neuro's really been out front, and they've had several different initiatives dealing over the years, federally sponsored, that have also been really contributing to that area. And I think the neuromod area has been a fascinating area to me in general. It's one of the ones where when I think about, when we talk about randomized trials and things like that, I always think of neuromod as the counter to that. So I'm not saying there's not randomized trials and things, but it started almost at an experimental level, with human data in a lot of ways. And it was really kind of, trying to correct conditions that were just non-tractable and looking for alternative solutions. And the OR can be a little bit of a place where you can learn enough to actually, create therapies versus like preclinical environments and things like that as well. And I think neuromod's kind of one of those areas that really has kind of grown in that direction. It really shows us the way in a lot of places. I think your comment on the platform designs is interesting because there are, robotic platform designs that are being, pushed off to multiple different surgery types, but then again, those are a little bit maybe mismatched as well. So it's interesting to see kind of how that space will develop going forward. It's unclear to me. I ask that question all the time in my provocative questions course as to, is it going to be more modular? How specific will it be? How ubiquitous do you need your platforms to be? And then low cost that seems to be everywhere. That and the ability to put it out into areas that are less served by the high tech hospitals, that kind of thing too. It seems to be if you really want to translate health care out from the cities, and we need to do that as a society, I think, in general. So that's great. So that's so kind of some of the research side of things. We're a little change a little bit more towards the focus regarding our program, and I'll ask you a couple of questions in there, and we'll see what you think. So starting with you, Shikha, I know when you were here, you were in the T32, which is an NIH training program, and we did a lot of work in clinical immersion and whatnot. And so one of the features of our master's program of engineering and surgery and intervention is this idea of immersive experiences. And I guess, as you've moved on in your career now, and you're quite a bit further in now, I guess when you think about what has that kind of experiences, or are those type of experiences important for your career, and then as for the folks that you hire, that exposure to I'll say clinical and patient environments, which is a little bit different than necessarily pure surgery. I guess have you seen that as a benefit, and for the folks that you're hiring, do you think that's important?
Right. Yeah, I mean, first of all, I would say that those experiences have had a huge impact on my own personal understanding of the field. And I know that a lot of people don't have opportunities to have these experiences. So when we are hiring, we do understand that, but it is something that we want to look at, right? So we are an AI center. We are looking at people with computer science degrees, and having technical skills is very important. But with any AI program, I would say, but especially with healthcare applications, you really need to understand what it is that you're solving and what it is that you're doing. Sometimes I've noticed that, engineers, as we get very excited about a technical problem, and we want to model something complex. And often maybe there is little to no clinical impact in doing that, or maybe it's actually more disruptive to the clinical space than helpful. And these are the types of things that are very difficult to understand. And the program that I had at Vanderbilt really gave me the opportunity to talk to so many providers, surgeons, clinicians, to understand what their daily challenges are. And the provocative questions course that you just mentioned, that was really helpful. I mean, at first it was really daunting because you don't know how to think about clinical problems. You're like an engineer, and I took like biology years ago, but you kind of like get into it. Kind of reminds me of, when you learn swimming first, you need to get comfortable in the water.
That's right.
right? So it's kind of like you need to learn to understand their language. Even the terms that we use are very different. Starting from, even though we're all communicating in English, because of our training, we have very different ways of thinking. So just the ability to talk to clinicians and understand what needs to be solved, and where can we have the biggest impact is a very, very important skill. And I would urge like all engineers to think about that. I mean, especially in healthcare space, but in any AI problem. I mean, we've been seeing quite a bit about the impact of AI on society and the world. And part of it is maybe like not thinking through what could happen when you are using your algorithms, right? So that is like a very important skill. I mean, I always look for that in people who are joining the company, and it's just I cannot stress enough how important it is to have like some clinical understanding of what problems you're trying to solve.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many times I've sat with physicians and they'll come up with one point that they may not think is important. It's such a small point of their process, and when they tell me, I'm like, oh, geez, I got to redesign something just based on that one little quirk in terms of the order in which they do a procedure or something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a little different in the AI space, but knowing what that data is, what its impact is, and how it's read, I mean, those are all very, very similar aspects to it. And then even the order and kind of understanding of how they use symptomology, to make their diagnosis, and those kinds of things are just all super important. Elizabeth, kind of the same thing to you. I mean, the neurospace in general has a lot of nuance in terms of procedure. I don't know if you've had any, exposure to that to some degree about, is our clinical experience is kind of important for the folks that you hire, kind of understand that space a little bit in terms of the impact to what they're trying to design, I guess, what they're trying to build.
Yeah, I mean, I echo everything that you both have said about this, and I'll add that I had this my own personal experience coming from grad school, wanting to work in medical devices, but I actually didn't have any industry experience, and what ended up making me a strong candidate was the clinical work I had done between my BS and my MS, which, I had even, done a co-op as a surgical tech, in undergrad. It was, a great experience, but I didn't intentionally do that. In some ways I got lucky that I happened to do that. And so, I can't really underestimate the value here. The same, I think, again, just like swimming in the water, just being in the water first, understanding the nomenclature, seeing the users and how they work together as a team is really critical. I think that when you get to work in an atmosphere in school, like the program at Vanderbilt, it's better than observation. Observation, you can get some information, but until you're working with and next to the users, you won't understand the why, because you have to ask, and have access to them, and have practice trying to solve problems for them. And the other thing is, you if you're smart about it, you take that opportunity and you get to see competing technologies or solutions that are trying to solve the same problem, and you see where they succeed or where they fail, and you see, does this particular device is so cool, but maybe it's over engineered because you need someone with really highly specialized skills that doesn't exist in that paradigm, or it might have a lot of parts that get lost in sterile processing, or there's a number of things, right? It could just be unreliable because it's complex. And when you get to spend time in environments like this is when really the ideas are born. You understand the problems you're trying to solve. You learn a lot about how not to do it. You see where there's opportunities. And along the way, you sort of gain these practical skills. So you mentioned customer discovery. You start to develop a way of interviewing users. You develop a methodology. Even if you don't realize you're doing it, you get to watch other people do it and take the good and the bad. And so that when, you're interviewing for a company and you can sort of express these things firsthand, it's very authentic, and it when you've got somebody in the interviewee's seat that can talk about these things and have lived it. You can't listen to this webcast and hear me say that and just say what I said verbatim. You have to actually live it to contribute to a conversation like that. And so it's really important.
I feel like you've been listening in on my lab meetings, because we have this all the time about sterility and too many parts, and we're losing things. And it's so true.
The devil's in the details.
That's true. We're coming to the close here, but I want to ask one last question to both of you, which is, you have careers now, right in the prime of your careers, and seen a lot over the course of those. I guess, do you have any parting tips to folks that might be considering getting into this area of high tech with respect to surgery and intervention, and kind of how exciting is the space? Got any tips for our users? I'll start with you, Shikha, and then I'll go to you, Elizabeth, at the end.
Yeah, I think it's a very exciting space to be in right now. A lot of if you look at the direction of health problems in the future, we're looking at an increase in chronic diseases. People are living longer, so the longer you live, the more chronic diseases there are. And these actually have a very different paradigm than some of the acute problems that we've learned to solve in medicine. We have not learned to solve or deal with chronic diseases because they tend to be such intractable problems. There's too many things at play. It's not just about taking a medication. It's not about just doing an intervention. All of the middle of, like, if you have a high stress job, if you are exercising regularly, if you're eating right, if you're meditating or not, or if you have some other genetic conditions, there's so many things that go into it. Those are the types of problems that we have not yet learned to solve very well, but maybe with new technologies like AI and foundation models and so on, maybe we have a glimmer of hope in maybe being able to solve them. So that is like an area that I'm really looking forward to making. It's a small thing to think about, but it has like a very big impact, in my opinion. So that is something that I'm really looking forward to.
Absolutely. Elizabeth, how about you? Any tips or last minute thoughts?
Yeah, I to sort of build on that, on the device space and in surgery, I think that a lot of the technologies have been reactive. Surgery in general is destructive, and the innovations are really about minimizing risk and increasing, your recovery response and all of that. But I think where you see a shift is, and I think the areas to jump on, if I were to be joining, the med device space, would be, to look at the therapies that address the underlying disease and cause, like, targeted delivery of gene and cell therapies or bioelectronic devices. And, those are really going to, have the potential for a cure, have the potential to really stop disease, and things like that. So, I think those are the great opportunities that are out there today.
Well, that's great. I really, this has been great. We have to wrap this. I could talk all afternoon on this. That's really interesting work that you're both doing, and as well as I think these are all super interesting topics. I think actually we'll probably have another one of these at some point, because I think this is such a growing area, and it's so complicated but interesting, and it blends a lot of things, not just procedure, but lifestyle changes and structure of healthcare and all these things, even the type of device and the extent of how these devices interact with humans. I think it's awesome too. But that we have to wrap things up. So I'd like to thank both Elizabeth and Shikha for joining us. I really appreciate. I know you're busy, and this is kind of one of those things. What's he want? But I really appreciate it, and I do think it helps students understand how the space is growing and what the opportunities are. And I think both of you have really represented that really well. I think the students really appreciate it too. So with that, thanks. And I'll give my last disclaimer. I'm no expert MC at any of this. I'm just an engineering researcher, just like everybody else. So if I fumbled and I bumbled, as I always tell my kids, I will do better next time. So take care, and I will see you next time.
Can I add on to that disclaimer?
Oh, yeah,
Like I was saying, right? Can I add on to that disclaimer? I'm also, if there's a lot of these things are just some of the opinions that I have about healthcare space. And, if anyone thinks otherwise, like I would welcome comments and questions. But yeah,
Yep.
We're all learning, and it's a very new and interesting space.
Yeah, that's kind of the point of these, really, is just to introduce folks that are working in this space and kind of just seeing things and seeing how things are evolving. And I mean, it's a breakneck speed. There's no question about how fast this all moves. And, you all are staying right on top of the wave, moving with it. So that's awesome. So thanks again. Appreciate your time.